Both Ronnie and Reggie, they thought they were untouchable. And in a way they were, but they just pushed it a little bit too far.
The inquiry's fizzling out when Nipper gets a call to say that a man called Hew McGowan, who owns a nightclub called The Hideaway in Gerrard Street, is willing to tell him that he is being lent on by the Krays, who not only want money, but they actually want a share of the club.
So Nipper Reid interviews McGowan, interviews his assistant manager, Sidney Vaughan, thinks McGowan's okay, but Sidney Vaughan is a good witness. Nipper Reid goes to McGowan and he says, "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" And he says, "Yes, this is despicable, and I'm willing to testify."
He's delighted, obviously. This is gold at the end of the road. Ronnie and Reggie are arrested.
My name's Ivan Lawrence, and I was junior counsel in defence of the Krays in a number of their cases in the 1960s. I had no idea who the Krays were, and in fact, until I appeared for them at court, and there was this crowd of photographers and journalists outside, brought home to me that they were actually very important people in the criminal world. The allegation was that the Krays were muscling into the Hideaway, demanding money by menaces, threats which leave the recipient of the threats unable to make any other decision than to accept. The charge of demanding money with menaces resulted in about 14 years in prison, so the Krays would have been put away for a very long period of time.
When they were arrested in 1965, Violet was in a terrible flat. Typical mother, crying and saying, "Why have they been arrested?" Someone said they were demanding money. She said, "Well, why would they demand money? They've got plenty of money, more money than anybody round here." So that's another lie, isn't it?
Hew McGowan made a statement to the police that Ron and Reg had threatened him that if they didn't get an interest in the Hideaway, they would see the place smashed up. Well, I have here my notebook, which is dated the 15th of January 1965. This was obviously McGowan. Ronnie suggested we draw up an agreement to protect me. In return for the protection, I would give him 50%. I said I thought it was a pretty high percentage. Ronnie said it would well be worth it. There would be no trouble at all at the club. I said I didn't expect any trouble anyhow. I said I thought it was a lot to ask as we were just opening up. It was proposed that if I did open the club, I would have trouble. There was a determination by the police to make this a prosecution that stuck. So they went for trial at the Old Bailey.
McGowan just feels that he can cope with this, that they're not all that, and that maybe if somebody stood up to them, then maybe they would go away. I would suggest that's quite naive.
At the trial, the witness didn't substantiate the allegation that the Krays had threatened him.
The assistant manager, Sidney Vaughan, recounts his story. He's Nipper Reid's best witness, and he has swapped sides and says that what he said about demanding money with menaces wasn't true, and he was instructed by McGowan to say that. They've got to Nipper Reid's main witness, basically working on fear.
There was threats of violence. There was witness intimidation. It's what goes on. The twins, they could convince you it was in your interest to let go.
And unfortunately, the whole thing was brought to a standstill.
and the jury acquitted the Krays of the allegations of blackmail.
The Krays have won. They believe they're untouchable. The newspapers are reporting something similar. Nipper Read has been told to back off and is sent off to another division to forget about the Krays.
They were welcomed back to the East End as conquering heroes. The police had allegedly tried to stitch them up, but they got off with it. This added to this sense of they could do whatever they wanted to do.
There was such a day in Valence Road, and there's all those lovely pictures of them shaking hands. The neighbours came out. See, everybody in the East End, all the neighbours, what we call the normal East Enders, they were so happy that they was acquitted. Because again, they thought, one to the Krays, nil to the law. One of the very few times I've seen Ronnie Kray, what I call happy, really happy, really smiling. He very rarely smiled. He had this little sort of sardonic grin that went up the side. He was the happiest probably that I've seen him, was that day.
Do I think that justice was done in the case of blackmail? I, as the barrister, could only go on the evidence as it was adduced in court. But I'm as suspicious as everybody else is, I suppose.
By this time, the whole Kray publicity caravan was in full flow. Photographers were always ready, and they had a famous interview with the BBC at this particular time about their life in Clubland.
My investment in the Kray twins began essentially when I joined the BBC. I invested in them journalistically. I was interested in the rise of the Kray twins. I think they must have thought that it might be useful to have friends in the press. And I certainly thought it would be useful to have friends in the world of gangsters. And when they were found not guilty, I knew them well enough to invite them to BBC Broadcasting House.
How much has this trial cost you?
It's cost us roughly £8,000.
And how do you feel about that?
I don't suppose anyone likes the idea of spend that money for no reason at all, you know.
Does it leave you broke, or how does it leave you?
It doesn't leave us broke, but at the same time, it's a lot of money to have to pay out when money's innocent, you know.
A lot of people have got the impression from this trial that Clubland, London, is very tough. Do you think it is? You run a couple of clubs.
Well, in all clubs you get an occasional drunk, you know, and sometimes they have to be slung out, and that's why there's doormen and that, but I suppose it's like Clubland all over the world, really. It's just the same as... I don't suppose it can be that bad, as people won't go to them, really, would they?
Ronald, what do you think about Clubland in London?
Well, I think most clubs are very respectable, you know, and I don't think there's any trouble at all in them, except occasionally.
Can you tell me why, during the trial, you didn't give evidence?
Well, we was advised by legal people not to give evidence.
Why was that?
Well, the law of this country is well established. The onus is on the prosecution to prove its case. Counsel for these two men and the third defendant were quite satisfied in their own mind, as I in my own humble way was as well, that the prosecution had not proved their case, and there was no obligation on these men to go and to make any answer to any of the allegations against them.
What are you going to do now that it's all over?
Well, I'd have a bit of family life now, you know. I intend to get married in the near future. Well, I did before this case, but it's put back over the case, and I'll just get married as soon as possible, you know.
Ronald, what are you going to do now?
Well, I'd like to go abroad for a short while, and then I'd like to be left alone.
Both of them looking like hurt victims of justice, you know. They couldn't understand why they'd been arrested. And they answered it just taking the mickey, really. I think their decision to give that interview was the beginning of real fame and power for them.
They were known from one end of this country to the other, and the police couldn't touch them. They were at a new level.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly, moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.